Hey everyone, this is Robbie with Believe in the Run, and I'm here today for our Instagram Live, Tuesdays at whatever time. Today it's 3 p.m. I'm actually excited, I'm really excited today. I'm talking to Floris Gierman. So, Floris is with Path Projects, which is an apparel company out in California, American made clothing. Hey Floris, just joining the show. Jin here. Um, Path Projects, super awesome company. We've worked with them for a little while. We've reviewed their gear, worn it. They make some super comfortable stuff. It's pretty awesome. I'm going to add Floris into the show here. Hey, Floris.
Hey, Robbie, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing good. Good
Great.
to see you.
You too, man. So yeah, I was explaining to everybody that you're with Path Projects, who we've worked with for I don't know, probably the last few years. We've reviewed some of your clothing and gear, and which honestly is some of the most comfortable like running clothing that I've worn. I love the simplistic design, kind of just like straightforward running gear that's high quality. Is your Are your products made in the USA? I can't remember. I was trying to remember.
Some of our products are.
Okay,
So our t-shirts and our baseliners at this point still are made in the US.
cool.
Our shorts are made overseas.
Okay, awesome. Yeah,
So
and I think I've told people this before, but they're some of the most comfortable clothes. Like the shorts I wear like every day in the summertime.
I'm glad to hear that, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been fun. We've only been around for about 2.5 years now.
Okay.
And that is like we are using very premium Japanese materials. And that is indeed the feedback that we often receive that it's very comfortable, even on like the hot and humid weather runs. So
Yeah, someone just asked the name again. So it's Path Projects. We tagged them in the post from yesterday, and we'll link to that afterwards and so on. So, but
yeah,
anyways, yeah. So tell me how Path Projects started, because I know you used to work for Volcom. Is that correct? Or
yeah,
okay. And
yeah.
what?
So
Yeah, go ahead.
so Path was founded by Scott Bailey. He's my business partner, and he previously used to run two different brands, and it was Crew and Supra. So both in the action sport industry.
Okay.
And he sold that business in 2015. And at that point, he was running a lot and he simply couldn't find really the shorts that he was looking for. So, actual running shorts that he could commute in. So, he actually took about 18 months to develop like the ultimate short
Oh wow.
with like a whole lot of different pockets that you can put your phones in, your keys, your GoPro, sunglasses, whatever you're running with. And that's what he ended up coming out with. And I was one of the first guys to actually order something from a test website because we had a mutual friend, Jeff Rowley, a skateboarder.
Oh,
Um,
dude, I remember Jeff Rowley from back in the
yeah,
day.
exactly. So I was having dinner with Jeff, and he told me like, "Oh,
Okay.
my good friend Scott, he started this company." And
Nice.
so that's when I actually tried some of the gear, and I right away reached out to Scott, and I was like, "You're really onto something over here. How can I join you? How can I help you with this?"
That's awesome. And
So
then,
that
so how many years ago did you join Path?
I joined full time about 2 years ago now.
Okay, cool.
So,
That's
so yeah,
awesome.
we've been doing a whole lot of photo shoots. We've been out there quite a bit, and it's been really fun. Like at this point, it is still the majority of it is US focused, but we're now starting to see more and more customers international as well. So it's definitely expanding.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm excited. I know you have some new shorts and stuff coming out like that. I'm excited to try those. So,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. I'll actually yeah. So those are going to be on the way next week. I'm not sure if you can
okay,
see this actually. So
cool.
this is that new one that we're going to be mailing your way. And here's some of those pocket configurations as well that we talked about there.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool. I'm excited to try it,
yeah,
dude.
yeah. No, for sure.
So let me ask you a question. So one of the other things we wanted to talk about was heart rate training and the Extramilest, which is your other kind of, I guess, side project slash business. I'm not sure how that ties into Path Projects or if it's completely on the side. So maybe, um, actually, let's dial it back a little bit. Tell me a little bit about how you got into running and how maybe running led to path projects and then to Extramilest and heart rate training and everything where you're at now. Because
Yeah.
it sounds like you came from like a skateboarding background and like maybe like so yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's so much crossover within skateboarding and running as well that I will talk about in a minute here. But
Yeah.
I basically grew up skateboarding in Amsterdam, and I really wanted to work in skateboarding. So when I was 20 years old, I moved to the US and I got a job for Tony Hawk. So for 3 years, I worked with Tony. I traveled all around the US, many different spots, and that was just my dream, my passion.
What year was that? Like in the late 90s?
That was early 2000s. So
Okay, okay.
2003 to 2000. Yeah, like worked with him for about 3 years.
Wow, okay, cool.
And then was out skateboarding every single day. That's what I really enjoyed doing. From there, I moved over to Volcom, worked further in the apparel space, really enjoyed that space. It was focused on skateboarding, surfing, snowboarding, the music, the lifestyle. And then from there on, I just kept getting injured with skateboarding, like kept falling, like, and I broke my wrist. I ended up breaking my wrist 6 times, got a bunch of screws in there and everything. And that's when I was like, you know what? I still have all this energy, but I simply get hurt so many times. So I picked up running. And at the beginning, like it was really having to get used to it. I dabbled with running here and there a little bit. But then in early 2013, when my first daughter was born, I was like, I don't want to be this overweight dad. I want to be like in the fittest shape of my life. And that's what I ended
Yeah.
up like. I went from really running very minimal and inconsistent to like running like very fanatic. I ended up joining a trail running group in Los Angeles, the SoCal Coyotes, with Jimmy Dean, a really established runner as well and a running coach. And so, yeah, learned a lot along the way. But I will never forget, though, my first marathon was a terrible experience. And that was like in 2007. And I hit the wall and I bonked and I said, I will never do it again. But then this kind of second go around was way different, where I went about it a little bit more strategic. I came across like a lot of different established coaches and runners that I just learned a lot from. And I started adapting from there on actual low heart rate training. And that made a big difference for me. Like, whereas I used to run all of my workouts at high heart rate and I would come back and feel exhausted after all of my runs, all of a sudden I had to slow down significantly and actually like get used to some additional frustrations and challenges. But over time, as things progressed, it's really started to click and the running just went a lot easier.
So when you say that you're running all your workouts at a hard effort, so you were a normal runner.
Pretty much. Like, that's the thing. Like, I truly think that 90% of the people out there are just running way too hard, way too many times. And they don't have enough energy left that when a harder workout comes to actually be able to push that pretty hard.
Yeah. So when you were running those harder or just like normal paces for runners, were you getting injured at that same time as well? Because I know that happens to a lot of runners. Like even myself, when before I started doing heart rate training, I was I was only running maybe 45 miles peaking during marathon training, but I would be doing like 8 mile like hard like speed workouts and just being like my legs, and I eventually injured myself to where I was at a point where I was out for like almost a year and a half. So
No, it was definitely similar. Like coming back from workouts and just having your legs hurt so bad. And like literally when you come out in the morning, and even in your early 30s, you shouldn't hurt that bad when you come out of bed in the morning after workout, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's a time and place to push it harder, but that shouldn't be the norm to be able to go out and experience that every time. So
yeah. So did you also encounter any injuries like that made you frustrated?
yeah, I had several running injuries in the early stages myself, absolutely. But then that's why this second go around, I was like, I do want to go about this much differently because I've seen what works and what doesn't work, or exactly what doesn't work. So from there on, it became more of a gradual build-up in training volume. It became running at a lower intensity, but at least running higher volume because the body was just able to absorb the training much better. So
yeah, so maybe for people who don't know that much about heart rate training, and maybe it's the first time heard of it, it's like, or they've heard about it bouncing around the running realm. Tell us a little bit more about what heart rate training is, or maybe a general rundown about it and how it works.
Yeah. So basically, when you go out and you run, obviously your heart rate increases as you put in more effort. Your body just needs more oxygen. Your heart starts pumping harder. The thing is, there is a fine line at what point you're actually using mostly fat for energy, and at one point it's going to cross over into using like glucose, sugar, and process or like refined carbs, whatever you have in your body at that point starts using the energy levels from that.
Sure.
If you're constantly running at a really high heart rate, you're always using the sugar and whatever else is in your body and not the fat necessarily well. So
Mm-hmm.
after a while, if you actually learn how to slow down and run at a lower intensity, actually you train your body well to use stored body fat, which all of us have plenty of, as a fuel source because it can burn really efficiently.
Right.
And that way, especially like not only on training runs, but even on the marathons around the bunking point, if you're a well established fat burner, like you're much able, it's much easier to run through that mile 20 than when you're like full on using really high heart rate and high sugar levels. So.
Sure. And I mean, I guess that's basically why people take goos every 6 miles or something, is to get that extra boost. And I know, like, even for fat adapted people or uh, heart rate training, advocates, it's still that gel or goo helps during the race. But I know, like, especially if you're burning off those sugars, that
Yeah,
obviously,
and I think here's the difference too between training and racing. It's like yes, most of your training miles in the initial stages are going to be at a lower intensity.
right.
When your body is able to handle some more training volume, once you're more fat adapted, you'll start adding in some speed work to really get the combination of and a higher training volume and adding in some speed work. But only if your body can handle it. There's too many people who end up adding speed work before their body is strong enough to handle it. And this is where a lot of injuries happen as well. But
Sure.
then on race day, yeah, you're going to be racing at a higher heart rate. It's just that your body, even at a higher heart rate, is able to burn fat more efficiently.
Yeah. So for everyone out there, I actually, even though I've known Floris for a little while through past projects and everything else, I also started listening to your podcast in Extramilest, which is devoted to heart rate training. And you go the angle of like kind of like through Phil Maffetone's philosophy of heart rate training, and then kind of tweaked to your own training plan that you developed. And let's talk about the formula for like how you train, because that was something that I think a lot of people, when they hear about heart rate training, they're wondering like, what does that mean? Like, what speed do I run? So what is that like for you, at least the way that you teach people how to do it?
Yeah, so there's several different formulas that you can use to define your zones. Like, yeah, you have the 220 minus 8, and you define your zones on that. You can go to a medical lab and pay $200 and get a lactate threshold test done. You can get your actual zones determined that way. One other way is determine your max heart rate by going out and running really hard, seeing what that is, and from there on calculating your different heart rate zones. One other way, and that is developed by Dr. Phil Maffetone after working with many different athletes over the years, he developed a 180 formula. And that is basically high level, it is 180 minus your age. So let's say you're 40 years old, it's 180 minus 40, gets to a number of 140. And from there on, you can tweak it with your health or lifestyle profile. Like if
Right.
you're very new to running, have been inconsistent running or injured, you take 5 off. If you're on medication, you take 10 off. If you've been very consistently training for up to 2 years, you keep the number as is. Or if more than 2 years consistent training, you add +5. And so basically you get to a number of, let's say it is the 140 we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And then 10 beats below it, that would be the training zone. So 130 to 140.
Right.
And in the initial stages, you're just going to go out there, put a heart rate strap on, and you go run and see until what pace you have to slow it down to not have your heart rate alarm go off at 140.
Yeah.
And for many people, this means, like, let's say they used to run 9-minute mile. All of a sudden, they have to run 11 or 12-minute mile, or they even have to take walk breaks because it starts spiking up.
Yeah. I could say from experience. So I started your plan back in January. I will say loosely started in January. I was still coming off that injury and was doing like coming back in very gradually. So I would say by the time I got to 20, 25 miles a week, it was like mid-February, which is kind of when I put it as I really started doing it. So when I first started doing heart rate training, and I was using heart rate monitor. Where is it? Oh, here it is. So I use a Polar like H10 heart rate monitor,
Yeah.
which worked very well for me. Um, so I couldn't believe the pace I was running at when I first started doing heart rate training. I was like, because I was used to doing in my old marathon training, like a long run would be 8:45 minutes per mile, or maybe 9. And my math formula is 180 minus 37. So actually, I just turned 38. So it was 143. So I had to keep my heart rate below 143. And I was running at a 10:45 pace, I think, for the first. And I'll put running in quotes. I was lightly jogging, so I'm walking up hills. So it was very frustrating for me. And I know one of the things that people struggle with when they first do heart rate training is that super slow speed where they're like, this can't be real. Like, I can't be this aerobically unfit. And so I don't know, did you have those struggles when you first started doing it? Because I know it's hard. I think that's the hardest thing about heart rate training is getting over that mental hurdle, especially when you run with groups or people who are, you're used to running like an 8:30 pace and suddenly you can't run with them. Luckily, like COVID, I couldn't run with them anyways, so that was a good timing in that way. So yeah, like maybe talk about that hurdle of like how you stick to staying under that heart rate, especially when there's a lot of peer pressure and things like that.
I think you touch on it right there. Like, if you look at what is it that you're frustrated about, right? Obviously, you have been running at an 8:30 or 9-minute mile, and all of a sudden you're going to slow down by 2 minutes. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just for yourself of like, oh, I know I can run faster than this. Or it's even the ego part of like, oh, I'm posting runs on my Strava that are a lot slower. But it's also that group component where all of a sudden, if you want to run with a group, it's more challenging at the beginning, especially if there's a faster group pace, which, let's face it, realistically, whenever you go on group runs, most often the pace is pretty fast.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I run with a group called the Faster Bastards, so you can imagine.
Good luck.
I had to give that
So,
up.
but yeah, those frustrations are real, and especially when you start looking at other elements as well. Like right now, it is warmer outside, so obviously the heat, you notice that your heart rate goes up quicker. If there's
Yeah.
any hills involved, if there's any elevation involved, even the cold in the winter can do some weird things to the heart. But then, if you realize that you do this for a little while, and you're able to leave your ego at the door, and you're able to get over those frustrations and see this as a short-term investment for a longer-term payoff,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, once after a month, you start seeing at the same heart rate, you can run 30 seconds a mile faster.
Mm-hmm.
And the next month, again, 20 seconds or 30 seconds. And that is exactly what happened with me as well. Like at the beginning, I was running, let's say, 9-minute miles. Like I used to always run all of my training miles around 7-minute miles. And that was for me like, yeah, let's go run out. But I would be very tired.
Yeah.
On the flat, I would have to slow it down to, let's say, 9-minute miles. And on the trails, it would be like 11-minute mile, 13-minute mile, walk breaks, no more group runs for a little bit there. But after a month, that all of a sudden dropped by 40 seconds, and the next month by another 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And so go figure that at the same effort, you're a minute faster. All of a sudden, it becomes easier and easier. And these runs that used to be 11-minute miles become 10:30, 10. And if eventually you're able to run at the same heart rate again that you used to, but now at 20 beats a minute lower, go figure what that is going to do during a marathon.
Yeah. Yeah. So so from my own experience, I started out like around 10:45, started slowly building my mileage up. Things went a little crazy during like the beginning of the coronavirus, just because it was like, as you can imagine, everyone, your life's like upended. I was stressed out. And so I had a weird, like, down period then for the first couple weeks. Then it like turned around to where my last math test. So if anybody's wondering, like once a month you do a test where you basically run around a track for 45 minutes to an hour, and you do the same track like every month, hopefully replicating the same conditions so that you can tell how much progress you've had. So my last test was in May. It's actually almost a month ago now, and so it was at 9:15, I think, 9:10. So it was pretty awesome to see my pace come down by a minute and a half over the last three or so months.
Well, and keep in mind too, like you're absolutely not alone with the whole COVID thing. Obviously, everyone is experiencing that to some extent, whether that is interruption in your training, or even if you're still able to train, there's still that stress level in the back of your mind as well. And this is such an important component. This is more of a holistic approach to training. So it's not just looking at the running component, but looking at the stress levels, looking at the nutrition. If you're eating garbage, your fat burning is not going to be optimal.
Right.
So there's all sorts of other things, making sure you have enough sleep, which obviously during COVID, a lot of people were out more stressed, waking up in the middle of the night. Well, your running performance is going to suffer to some extent, but over time, as things progress, as long as you head in the right direction over a longer period of time.
Yeah, that was especially like the sleep thing. The eating thing was a weird one because, so I'm not gonna lie and say that I'm a crazy like healthy eater all the time, or like I eat generally fine, not like fast food all the time or anything. But during the COVID thing, like it was weird. Like I found myself drinking a lot more, like eating ice cream a lot more. Just like it was like a weird first month, and like
it's stress eating, man. It's real.
I've never done that before. Like that's never been a thing that I think I've ever done, and so it was just weird to see it happen. And then like I feel like the last few weeks have kind of like turned it back around, but it was crazy there for a second.
yeah. No, you're definitely not alone on that. I've heard so many people who have indeed gained 10 or 20 pounds that definitely noticing that.
Yeah. So it's like it's been very encouraging just seeing the progress that's been happening. And like you said, it was a little bit of a mental struggle with the heat too, because here in Maryland, once you start getting into the summer, you'll go from like spring, and then the next day it's like 90 degrees and like 100% humidity. And so there was a week a couple weeks ago where it was miserable. And but then like this week we had a good low humidity week, and I'm starting to get under that 9-minute range now on a lot of my runs. So it's nice to see it like kind of turning around again like that.
So now you're basically back at your old running pace, but then at a heart rate that's a lot lower probably.
Yeah, and so I actually like a couple weeks ago, there's always a race in the first week of June in Baltimore called the Baltimore 10 miler, and it's an awful course because it's like you have this amazing downhill in the beginning, but it's like also at the end, so you're coming up, and it's a lot of rolling hills, but then it's always like the first week of the summer. So it ends up being super humid and hot, but you're not heated after yet.
Mm.
So, of course, the race was canceled, but we still ran it as like for fun, and it was like 80 degrees and 100% humidity that day, and I hadn't run any like hard race style runs since I started doing it, but I was like, I'm just gonna go for it today and see like what I got, and so. This is also only my third 10-mile run since I was injured like a year and a half ago. So it was like, I was like, I'm going to go for it and just like see how I feel. And honestly, I felt like really great like the whole time. And even though the conditions were pretty terrible and like a lot of people were falling off, like I ran it not too far off like my PR pace from a couple years ago. It was like 20 seconds slower, but like I felt good, and I was shocked at how my heart rate was high like by the end of it, of course, but it was pretty awesome to see like how I felt during a race style run.
Well done. And that is sometimes the challenging part too, when you train a lot at low heart rate. Like how is it going to translate to race day? And
Yeah.
that's why sometimes doing some of those workouts where you do have a fast finish, or like just to kind of see how the higher heart rate feels again, and even to continue the cadence and like knowing what some faster runs feels like too. Because
Yeah.
yeah, you can go into a race with all low heart rate training, but I think there's a time and place to add some speed work in there. Absolutely.
So that's a good segue because a lot of people wonder, like, do I just run at this low heart rate forever, or like, can I mix in some speed work? I think someone in the comments kind of asked a question like that just a couple minutes ago. So like, so how do you work in speed work to maybe get faster during heart rate style training?
So, you know, what's interesting, a lot of people can actually progress very well without even doing any speed work.
Sure.
It is just more that if you add speed work at the right time, then it's almost that layer on top again. What I do think is that, let's say if you train for about 3 months and you really take that time to slow down your pace, slow your intensity, and not just in running, but even don't go 5 times a week to the CrossFit and still get your heart rate up to 180 or 190 over there, because that's kind of defeating the purpose.
Right.
But if you end up just slowing down for those 3 months and then start adding some speed work once or twice a week at that point, either like you can do all sorts of things, whether it's fartleks, whether it's 400, 800s, whether you do some sections at marathon pace, whether you do some lactate threshold runs. Like there's a lot of variety of things. I'm a huge fan of some hill repeats. Like trail running, I think is great training as well for strength. But don't overdo that part either. I think too many people get like so excited about that part. But I do want to go back for a minute, because I think that the most challenging part for a lot of people is the first 3 months, or like really where they feel they have to slow down. And if people feel initially very frustrated, I think it comes down to becoming more aware and more mindful in your running, where instead of getting frustrated that you're running slow, actually finding ways to enjoy it. So actually paying more attention to your surroundings, actually like trying to find ways to still enjoy it. Like instead of running with music always, like get more in tune with the body, listen to your breathing, like feel the sun, like listen to what's going on around you. And all of a sudden, a whole new world can open again.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. A lot of people are super strict on this, but if you still want to do a group run once a week because that brings you a lot of joy, or you still want to do one higher speed workout a week, yes, although it's not 100% by the book, at the end of the day, if you still do the other runs at a lower intensity,
Yeah.
your chances of still progressing in this training approach are going to be higher, that you will stick with it because you actually enjoy it, versus like not enjoying any of your workouts.
Yeah. I
That's
think
the
that
case.
I thought that was a key thing for me too, because it was you know, if you are running so and you just commit to that, then you find those ways. So like one of the ways that you like to talk about is like nasal breathing. So like just trying to regulate your breathing through your nose. And I found like running a lot of my runs doing that helps me not even lower my, just it lowers my heart rate more, but it also just gives you that like comfortable rhythm to where you're like really enjoying your run. And another thing that I enjoyed, and I think you do this as well, is just doing doubles. I've been doing a lot of double runs during the day. So I'll do like, you know, 3 before work and then like 3 after, 4 after. And that actually has, I feel like that's changed a lot for me, because now I'm doing on a regular week what I used to do like close to peak marathon training, you know, but I don't feel beat up ever. I'm just like, if anything, I just feel more loose, and, you know, it's kind of,
Yeah.
it's more fun. I don't know.
No, same here. I'm a huge fan of double runs, especially once the volume is going up,
Hmm.
purely to get like a workout in the morning. Sometimes I even feel the workout in the afternoon or evening goes better if I've done the morning workout.
Hmm.
And the other thing is too, if the weather is hot, like you obviously, if you go on a 10-mile run, yeah, you will experience more cardiac drift towards the end, which is pretty natural. However, if you split it up in 4 and 6 or 5 and 5, or whenever it's like cooler in the morning, do 6 at that point, and in the afternoon do 4.
Yeah.
These are all some creative ways to still be able to run out there and activate your aerobic system quite a few times without experiencing too much stress on the body.
Yeah, exactly. And someone just asked a comment in a comment, can you integrate, I think she said, weight training into math training? And I think that's a lot of thing. It's something that people wonder, like, what about bicycling or something like that?
Yeah,
How's that?
I think with the weight training, um, you have to be careful. Even if you go to the gym and you start like heavy lifting,
Mm-hmm.
even though your heart rate might not get above math, you might still add quite a bit of stress for a short period of time, which can still raise your cortisol levels. So
Yeah.
it's kind of this fine line. Like during the base building, I wouldn't go overboard with it. But there's a lot of other ways that you can do strength training as well. Like if you go on a trail run or a trail hike even that is steep, you can still get creative like strength workouts in that way.
Yeah.
And so I think as far as for cross training, I'm personally, yeah, I think cross training can be very beneficial, especially for older athletes, for athletes who are training very high training volume just to keep pressure off the body.
Sure.
At the other hand, I do think you become a better runner by running more. And by if you run and your body is able to handle the training volume, I think running more versus spending too much time cycling or swimming or doing non-run specific workouts.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And actually, oh, someone else just asked another question, not completely related to that, but um, going back a little bit, what exactly is a math test? Because we have mentioned that a couple times,
Yep.
and how do you perform it?
So what a MEF test is, it's a max aerobic function test. Here, Jeffrey from Canada actually just posted in there.
All right.
So what you do is you go to a running track, ideally to a running track, purely because it's flat, it's even with wind, it would be minimal impact that way. And you warm up for about 15-20 minutes, and then you run for 5 miles or 8K if you have worked your way up that far, if you're able to do that. If you're just starting out, maybe do it for 2 miles or 3 kilometers. And every K or every mile, you actually time what your mile splits is. So for example, your first mile at a heart rate of 140, you might run it at 9 minute mile. The
Mm-hmm.
second mile, you might see that naturally drop to like a 9:15. The third mile might be 9:25. And so you'll start seeing the drop off. And so this is a snapshot in time of what your maximum aerobic speed really is at that heart rate. And so if you do that test again in 1 month, ideally all of the conditions are the same. You can see how much have you progressed. So the next month, if your training has been going well, you might expect to see at the same heart rate of 140, all of a sudden your first mile is an 8:30 minute mile or an 8:40 minute mile. From there on, the second mile might be 20 seconds or 18 seconds slower or whatever it might be. And so over time, you'll notice your 5 mile 8K is just going to keep dropping until at some point you're going to hit a plateau, and then it's up to you to decide, what is this plateau caused by? Is that stress related? Is that junk food eating related? Is that not having enough recovery? Whatever else is going on, if everything checks in the box that it's correct, from there on, and you feel like you're ready for some speed work, start adding in some speed work, and often at that point the plateau, you're able to continue improving after that again. So
Yeah, and I actually got a little bit lucky with my math test scenario. So I did it in February, and it was like snowing and like 32 degrees or something, or 28 degrees. And then I think like March or April had like the same conditions. And then in May there was a freak weekend where it was like 36 degrees out in the morning. And so I was able, it happened the same day as my math test, so I was able to
there you go.
replicate it perfectly.
Perfect. Yeah. So one thing I would definitely add to this is, if you want to do your math test and wherever you record your workouts, whether you do it on Strava or on Garmin, Coros, or you write it down somewhere, I would make sure that you also note your actual temperature that day, because it does make a big impact. If you're going to be doing your math test at 35, or you're going to be doing it at 80 degrees, it's
Yeah.
night and day, and it's almost hard to compare apples to apples, but at least if you're aware of what those conditions are.
And it's even the time of day and what you eat too can affect it as well. So try to replicate everything.
Exactly.
That.
Exactly. And yeah, sometimes you'll notice indeed some people feel that they run better in the morning, some people run better in the afternoons or evenings. So yeah,
Yeah. So kind of to sum up everything, one of the main reasons everyone does this is because they hear how much people's marathon times have improved or race times or everything like that. So how has that translated in your training or even in a lot of the people that you work with through Extramilest or that you've talked to? Which, by the way, if anyone's in here and looking for a great resource, check out the Extramilest Facebook group or yeah, Extramilest Facebook group. Get in there. Tons of people talking about heart rate training. It really helps me a lot in my training as well. So yeah, for you, how did that translate from your first marathon in 2007 to where you are today?
Yeah, so it is funny how you explained earlier how you went on a 10-mile run and all of a sudden you actually felt like quite good throughout the workout. And that
Uh,
was, or throughout the actual race. And that
yeah,
I've never felt that before. And so I ran my first marathon in 4 hours, 11 minutes. And it was literally like bonking, hitting the wall, never doing it again. This miserable, begging someone for a Gatorade because I thought I was going to die. And then fast forward, all of a sudden, like starting to train more wisely, increasing training volume, like training at lower heart rate and whatnot. My next marathon, I shaved off 76 minutes. So I went from a 4:11 to a 2:55.
that's
And then
insane.
from there, I qualified for Boston. And then I ran Boston in terrible conditions in a
What year was
2:44.
what year was that?
That was 2015.
Okay, yeah.
And so that was like 20 to 30 miles an hour headwinds, rain like no tomorrow. And so I ran another PR there of like 9 minutes at the time. And so, yeah, running comfortable throughout a race, especially during the later stages, was something I was not familiar with. And then from there on, I got hooked and I started experimenting with ultra running. And like I ran my first 50 mile and I got third place in my first 50 miler, which was awesome. And then ended up running some more 50 milers and like then I did a self-supported 100-mile run. And that was all like heart rate based really at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So like so prior to your 255, your second marathon, were you doing heart rate training then at leading up to that?
yeah, like the
Okay.
255 was
Yeah.
definitely like after 5 months of heart rate training.
Okay, cool.
So
That's so were you even planning on running a marathon again until you found out about heart rate training?
no, I was because my kid was going to be born and I needed something to motivate
Gotcha.
me to start running or start getting healthy.
Okay.
And then yeah, look what Jeffrey is even riding. He's
Oh
part
wow.
of the Extramilest and marathon group as well, and his PR dropped over 110 days by 9.5 minutes. And
Wow.
so even he had been trying to qualify for Boston for an extended period of time, and then things started to click once he and even there's for so many people who have to get used to having to slow down, but eventually once they start seeing it click, that's when it's easier to stick with it.
Well, I know. I mean, I told myself I'd give it a year because, like, I figure if I was injured for a year not running, like, I can take it easy for a year as long as I'm running. So that was kind of a blessing in disguise being injured, I guess. It gave me that perspective.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I will say in the first couple months had some doubts. Like, I was like, I don't know for sure if this is working, um, and then once it did, then it's clear that it was trending in the right direction. And I was like, okay, well, I'll keep doing this until like in your and in your program like that I followed and watched all the videos for. Like, it's nice because you hear like you kind of calm people by being like, look, like I know what you're gonna think. Like you're gonna think it's not working. You're gonna think you're plateauing, and now what do you do? And you kind of like lead or prepare people to for what to expect during, especially mentally during a heart rate training thing, because it's so against what most runners think. I mean, even now with all these new runners out there during COVID, you see everyone like bombing, like just like dying out of breath because when I first started running, I thought I need to feel burned out like to make sure I got a good workout in.
And that's the thing. I see that all the time, left and right around me. And it wasn't until I kind of went through this whole journey. And yeah, some people first have to get injured or burned out in order to start looking for other approaches.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like in 2013, I wrote my first blog post about it of like, this is all of the different things I just experienced. And this is how I ran my first sub 3 hour marathon with low heart rate training.
Yeah.
And then from there on, I think that all got 500,000 views. So it like people started to ask questions, and from there on, I wanted more people to know about this. And this is why I also in 2014 I started my podcast, and it was purely sharing stories from people who don't have to kill themselves in training, but actually more of a holistic approach to training, that you actually go out on a run and you actually enjoy it. And that's what I hear so many times across the board now. Like for the first time in my life, I'm actually enjoying my runs. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't have to be that painful. It doesn't have to hurt. We're doing this for the joy. We're not here to all become the next world champion, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, if you really want to run your whole life, you need to do it for the enjoyment of it, not to PR every single race or whatever. And the great thing about it is that you'll end up being PRing like probably most of your races if you stick to it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I thought, like you said, you started a while ago. A lot of people were interested in it. You started the Facebook group, and seeing the people post in your Facebook group, especially about like their progress and their times, like really helped me stay motivated because I'm like, okay, like clearly people are doing this and it works, So I'm definitely gonna stick with it and see what happens. So,
Yeah.
um,
I think that's one of the biggest part of this whole journey. It's like trusting that this can actually work. That, yeah, you're gonna have doubts in the beginning. You wonder, is this right for me? Is this really the right heart rate? And I will
yeah,
say for 90 to 95% of the people, I feel this heart rate works totally fine. They're just not used to slowing down to
yeah,
this extent. And so
yeah,
their norm of running is just always at a high heart rate. So they think that is normal.
right.
And and yeah.
Yeah. That training, like the heart rate that, uh, like the formula 180 minus your age. I think a lot of people aren't sure about that and like try to tweak it, like tease it up or whatever. And I think it's like kind of like the 80-20 rule for 80% of runners. Like that formula works perfectly. There might be some outliers like that
Oh
kind
no,
of
like here's the
10.
thing, for sure. If you have like the other day, I had a conversation with someone who had a max heart rate of 210 and he was 48 years old. Well, that is absolutely out of the range. And so the 180 formula, including some of the modifications, gave him a heart rate to run at of 120 or whatever it was, whereas he could comfortably run at a 170 heart rate.
Yeah,
But then there's different layers involved there as well. So how do you tweak it? Like if there's medication involved, some of that might suppress how you're feeling on your run. And
sure.
then there's like some different recovering from an injury. Like there's always different layers to it. That's why I don't think it's one formula that fits all. I
Yeah,
think it gives a good ballpark number. From there, you can go out, start training, and then from there on, if some tweaking is needed, absolutely go for it.
yeah,
But that is just a running component. Then I still think there's the other components of like the nutrition, the stress, the sleep that not enough people pay good attention to as well.
yeah, yeah. It's all part of it. Let me see if we got any questions from some people. I know we had some yesterday. Uh, okay, here's a good one. So no, Eric, I think this is from, says, my methadone pace is around 13 minutes per mile. Any tips on improving this? Thanks.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think 13-minute mile is that tricky point because you're right at the point of a very slow jog and a very fast walk. It's right that crossover point. So the biggest thing that I would say is, first of all, even walking will improve you aerobically if you're getting your heart rate in that training zone.
Yeah.
So there's many different ways that you can go about this. I would, first of all, train consistently, gradually build up your training volume in that training zone. I think from there on out, if you still want to get some faster runs in, slowly jog or walk up a hill and then just gradually down the hill, you can actually probably run a bit more comfortable. And you
Yeah.
might be at like an 11-minute mile or a 10-30-minute mile. So if you still want to feel like that cadence in the same way. The other things I would say, give it time. It takes time to progress. Don't try to rush through these things. Like the 13-minute mile, if you can get that down to a 12:30 to a 12, and whether that takes 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, overall, it's going to take time, but it will work if you're patient and consistent with it.
Yeah. And honestly, people, now's the perfect time. Like I told people, I think in one of the marathon or Extramilest groups, I'm like, look, if you're thinking about doing a heart rate training thing, like the coronavirus or pandemic is the perfect time to start doing it. Like, because you have
Yeah.
nothing else going on. There's no races. You can't really run in like large groups. So like, if you're thinking about testing it out, you could take 3 months and do it right now. I don't know.
Yeah. No, and we've seen that a lot as well, especially with all the races now being canceled.
Right.
A lot of people, even in our training programs, are like, okay, so now what? Are we like gonna just like continue racing until the same date, or we're gonna go back to base building? And that's totally up to you. Some people were, if they were truly putting in really high training volume, that might like get their immune system kind of compromised at some point.
Yeah.
It's like, do you want to continue training at a really, really high level? Or do you want to like step back on the training volume a little bit and
Yeah.
do some more lower intensity base building runs until you know what your next race is that you would want to do?
Yeah, exactly. Let me pull up a couple more questions here for you. So this is some path questions. So Cody Jett, who's one of our followers, asked, Path partnered with Billy Yang in the past. I think I've seen some videos from you guys. Will we see any more calibrations? And I know he meant collaborations, but that's autocorrect.
Yeah, so we did like a co-branded Billy Yang Path Project shirt, and it was very positive. The feedback was really good. We've been friends with Billy for many years, and yeah, absolutely respect all of the content that he puts out there. For anyone who's not familiar with his work, check out his YouTube videos. It's extraordinary good.
Yeah.
Trail running videos. It tells really good stories. Also, different marathon runners and everything in between. He has a great podcast. So yeah, we did a first initial collab, and we are absolutely in conversation with him to see what we could be doing next. So there are some
Nice.
some different ideas that are floating around.
Yeah, that's exciting. I always like his documentaries. I think the Leadville one, is that one
Yeah,
that he did? Yeah,
yeah.
that was a really good. That I think when I first started trail running, I kind of watched like all of his stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, the Leadville one was really good, and just in general, like about the whole thought process that kind of goes through runners' mind, like why we run, and especially once you get into the longer distances as well, it's really well documented.
Yeah, he has some good stuff for sure. And Cody actually also asked, will you do other colors with your shorts, like blue or like anything like that, or like do you have any plans for that? Because I know your shorts or your all your apparel is kind of like military green, black, gray.
I,
That.
I want to show real quick because this
Okay.
is kind of let me just go to the homepage over here, because you'll actually see all of our entire color palette is pretty much like that, where
Yeah.
all right, we do have gray shorts, black shorts, olive green shorts, and then we do have some different colors in there, like we have some gray, navy, but like, yeah, we have experimented with it.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, even when we would bring out sometimes other colors, like we came out with lighter shorts, and if they simply are sitting there in the warehouse and they're not selling through, whereas if we're running out of the blacks the whole time and they're selling way more, it's like, yeah, we're still in startup mode. We can only have so
Right.
much inventory in our warehouse at this point, and it's just more risky for us to take colors.
Sure.
And even though everyone is going to say they want pink dolphin 3-inch shorts, when it really comes down to, if you look at the volume of those versus the people who are truly going to buy some of the basics.
Yeah.
So yes, at this point, it is part of our brand identity, but that doesn't mean that down the line we wouldn't start experimenting with a few additional colors.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And let me another path question here. Why the preference for 5-inch or 3-inch shorts? Is it the cost of materials? I would love to see more options at 7-inch.
It was actually purely a customer request. Like, we came out initially with 7-inch shorts. That was our staple. We had two 7-inch shorts.
I have,
And
yeah, I've had a pair of 7-inch shorts from you guys.
yeah, and we had like a walk short, like an 8 inch, and we have a gym short, a 9 inch. But after that, like many people were asking us, and at this point, the 5 inch and 7 inch sells about the same. And then, of course, once we had the 5 inch, people were like, "We want a 3 inch."
Yeah.
So we've honestly we want to develop like a product line where we have a short for every single runner, and our real focus has been on running shorts and the baseliners. So we have a separate baseliner and short system for a few different reasons, but the biggest one is that your shorts are moving separate from your baseliner, so it really eliminates all chafing, especially on the ultra endurance distance. When you have anything in your pockets, there's just virtually no chafing that way. But
Yeah.
even on the shorter distances, and so at this point, we do have the different shorts available in the length of 3 inch, 5 inch, like 7 inch. We are going to come out with some additional shorts in 7 inch down the line.
Okay.
We have noticed quite a few people have actually wider legs than average. And so it's more of a relaxed fit because some of the classic fits were a little bit tight around the legs for some people. So.
Okay, cool. Let me ask, it might be hard to read this question. So I bought a Wahoo ticker before COVID hit, and I haven't been able to run on my gym treadmill, which would allow me to monitor. Oh gosh, the question's too long. Okay, I'm gonna say I thought. I'm sorry, we can't answer that because I can't get the whole question. I couldn't figure out where it was going either.
Okay. Well, if it was heart rate specific wise, I can share that I've done quite a few different experiments myself, and I've spoken to different watchmakers also about the accuracy of heart rate chest strap, arm strap, earphone strap, earphone, whatever heart rate is most accurate. And at this point, I still feel the chest strap is a really good option, especially when you compare it to the optical heart rate. And I've seen it for some people, they say optical works really well, but I've seen it personally being off by 20 or 30 beats, especially when you start trail running and there's hills involved. I've seen it pick up your actual running cadence. So
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of what she was asking. How do you track heart rate when not running on a treadmill? So yeah, use a heart chest strap monitor, especially like I was saying. I mean, this has been my favorite. I've used it for the last year almost. Polar H10. Yep. The Polar H9 is another one that they integrate with any GPS watch or device like that. So it works really well if you have a yeah.
Yeah, and the good thing is you can use it for all sorts of activities when you're running, when you're cycling, when you're like they even have the ones where you can take your heart rate while swimming.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Even the like I have the new Polar Great Axe, and it has like Polar's been always really pretty good with the optical heart rate, even even though it's not perfect because no wrist-based heart rate monitor is ever going to be perfect. And they added like 2 more LEDs to this version, so it has like 10. It's like lighting up your wrist like a Christmas tree, which is.
I was looking at that the other day because mine was like really bright when I took it off at night as well.
Yeah.
And I was looking at this, and yeah, it surely has like I don't know if you can even see it.
Like
but even this has like a lot of
that. It's like crazy.
Yeah, this one is like the Coros one, but it has
the Apex.
the Pro one that has the oxygen meter in it as well.
Yeah.
But you have to stand pretty still in order. You couldn't measure it while you're running, kind of thing.
Right. So let me see if there's one more question. Actually, I'm going to ask you a question. So what was this isn't so much heart related or past projects related, but so when I was like 12 or 13, I used to skateboard a lot, like when I was younger, and Tony Hawk came to the Birdhouse team came and did a demo in this parking lot at this tiny skate shop, like in Harrisburg, PA. And looking back on it, I felt so bad for these guys because this was when like skateboarding was at its lowest point ever. And they're bumming around in a van, showing up to this skate park or a parking lot where there's like random kids are bringing in kicker ramps and like a 1 kink rail and a fun box. And it's like the greatest skateboarders in the world. It was Tony Hawk, Willie Santos, Andrew Reynolds, and Paul Zitzer, and they're all like trying to tear up like this crappy equipment. But honestly, it was awesome. It was like one of the most coolest things of my life when I was a kid is meeting Tony Hawk and at some like random demo in my hometown. But so, what was like one of your favorite things getting to tour on the road with him for a few years?
I think it is just that, what you're describing right there. It's actually the part of there's such a passion, whether that is around running, around skateboarding. I think these subcultures just have people live and breathe it. It's not just that they do the activity, but even around it, they're still thinking about it to some extent, and it's almost who they become. And I saw that within running or within skateboarding as well. So to me, the whole part, I will never forget. I was at a demo at one point and we were lining up kids for an autograph signing. And this is Tony Hawk. And this was actually during his peak when the Activision game was out and he sold millions of Activision video games.
Right.
And we were lining up kids. And at some point I was talking to a little kid and he looked a little pale. And I'm like, are you all right? And he like walks up to the front and right in front of Tony, he was so nervous that he ended up puking. It was like, and I was like, oh no. But once again, it was just one of those things where I'm like, yeah, it is that much excitement that these kids will remember this meeting for the rest of their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I used to be that kid. I used to be that. And I was on the other side of the table actually helping facilitate the whole experience. So
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really cool to hear. I'd love to hear more about that someday. You know, what's funny is that shoot, it's like it's literally like in the next room over. I have my birdhouse hat that's signed by like all of them. Like it's that's still like right here. I keep it like it's crazy.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so that's awesome. I never knew that about you, so that was like really cool to hear.
Yeah, it was a natural transition from there because as much as America is known for like skateboarding, the amount of trails that we have around here as well. It's like I was just gonna go for like 6 months and go back, and that turned into I've been there for 16 years now. So.
That's awesome. Well, okay, we're running out of time here, bumping up against the hour limit. So, anyways, thanks for coming on, Floris. I really appreciate it. For everyone out there, if you're interested in more heart rate training stuff, head over to the Extramilest Facebook group or listen to the podcast. I'm actually going to be doing. I actually have it mostly written, by the way, like a 4 months training post that I'm going to post on Leaving the Run. And if you're looking for some sweet running gear and clothing, check out Path Projects and all their gear. They're on Instagram, everything, and go to the websites. And so anyways, thanks for coming on, dude. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Robbie. And I can't wait to read the post and connect more about it.
All right, cool, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right, later.
Bye.
Bye now.